to Fruity Knitting. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Andrew.
We hope you're having a wonderful Christmas or holiday time, and we're really happy to be releasing episode 110 so that you can sit back and enjoy watching it during this very special season. And we do know that many people around the world are not able to celebrate in person with their extended family or friends. We feel very lucky that we're able to spend Christmas together, so Andrew and I and our daughter Madeline. But we do hope that wherever you are around the world, that you still feel connected to your extended family and friends. And we also hope that our program today brings you lots of comfort and joy.
Yeah.
So we're still running with the Danish theme today, and we're presenting our second feature interview with Vivian Høxbro. So back in episode 109, we explored Vivian's extensive contribution to domino or modular knitting, and today we're going to learn all about the traditional Danish nightshirts. This is a really fascinating topic because whereas Shetland and other Scandinavian countries have been able to preserve their knitting traditions and their Fair Isle patterns, the Danish nightshirt patterns were lost when people stopped wearing the garments. And they were beautiful garments. They were sweaters with very intricate patterning all over them. They were only worn by women in the 18th and 19th century. And nowadays, most of those garments are just hidden away in museum archives because they're so old and fragile. And they were almost completely forgotten about. So Vivian, who's Danish herself, wanted to change all of that and bring them back out into the world. And so for 3 years, she examined around 80 historical garments with the aim of writing a very comprehensive book on the topic. And she did do that. Here it is. So it's available in Danish and in English. And she not only documents the history of the nightshirts, but she also includes over 200 traditional pattern charts. So modern knitters can now use them and design with them and just bring back this really great knitting tradition, bring it back to life.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating interview, and Vivian is the perfect person to be speaking about it. She is so enthusiastic, so dedicated on this topic, so that's coming up. You might recall in episode 108 that Andrea was dressed up in a stunning bridesmaid outfit in the traditional Fenu style, including the beautiful headdress, which was actually sewn into her hair. Well, in Fanø every year there is a festival called Fenu, which celebrates the cultural heritage of the island, and the costumes play a really central role in that. Today in the show we've got a segment where we're going to be looking at these costumes really closely, how they were made, the role that they played, and we've got two really fascinating guests. It's a really fun and interesting segment, so that's coming up. I have to say I'm not keeping up with my knitting, so I've got nothing to show myself, but Andrea has finished her paisley kofta, which you can see right here, so she'll be showing you that. She's also prepared a little tutorial on a really fun technique that she used in that, so that's coming up. And our daughter Madeline is going to be joining us. She's been working on her project, so she'll be giving you an update on that too. Before we get into the knitting, first of all, maybe I have to say again, I'm sorry about my voice. I'm going to get to the doctor next year. In the new year, I'm going to go to a doctor and see if we can do anything about this voice because it's not so good. Anyway, we just have to bear with it. I did want to give you a quick update on my health situation, and if you're new to the show, the background there is that in early October I was diagnosed with a brain cancer, so a brain tumour. And yeah, the situation now is things are kind of stable. I haven't got any major new symptoms, and the symptoms that I have had, so the dizziness and the balance problem, I have a problem focusing my eyes, fatigue and appetite and those sort of things. They're kind of stable. They're kind of staying maybe up and down a little bit day to day, but not changing majorly in any way. So that's kind of good as far as that goes. It has been about 10 or 11 weeks since I got the diagnosis, which in some ways is a long time to be sick, but in the context, it's not that long. Andrea and I are really seeing it's very much a mental and emotional challenge. And I think as time goes on, we're really learning to be very assertive about confronting that challenge. and really maintaining a positive attitude. We have had some ups and downs. It's definitely not easy. But we're sticking it out. We are determined, we're resolute, and I can only say I'm so grateful to have Andrea with me to be here as I go through this. We're really going through it together. I'm incredibly grateful.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so we don't want to get too deep and personal on you, but we do know that some of you really do want to know how we're going, so we just thought we'd give you the quickest update. I certainly have gone through some pretty dark times. When you do get a diagnosis like this, it is very easy for a great dark cloud of fear and doubt and panic to just descend on you, and it can sometimes completely overwhelm you, and that certainly has happened to me. But I've been able to get myself in a better place now, a place where I'm feeling way more hope and gratitude, so I'm very happy about that. One of the main things that's helped that to happen is just for me to consistently be anchoring my mind and my thoughts onto faith. That's been really significant for me. And it's funny because faith as a word or as a concept used to be sort of confusing to me, or I didn't really understand it as a concept. I didn't even really see a practical use for it in any way. But I can truly say now that faith is my lifeline. So just to summarise on our update, so we're just going to keep it short, but we're going well, and sort of emotionally and spiritually, we're in a good spot, aren't we?
Yep.
Yeah, we're in a really good spot, and we are completely grateful, very, very grateful for your ongoing support and your well wishes and your prayers. So thank you very much. So it's very exciting to be able to include Bring and Brag in this episode. Bring and Brag is where we show off our finished objects. And as you can see, I'm wearing my finished paisley kofta by Sidsel Høivik, all finished. So this garment has got so many strange memories attached to it because of everything we've been going through. So most of the time I just knitted it in a complete daze without any concentration. So there are quite a few mistakes sort of here and there. I haven't done the pattern right, and yeah, but that's how life goes. And I actually my heart wasn't in it when I was knitting it, and I didn't get any pleasure out of it. I have to make this clear that it's not because of the design. It was just because of my emotional state. But it wasn't really until I'd finished the design, I'd wet blocked it, and then I'd pinned it out to dry. And just after a couple of days, I walked past it in the living room here, and I looked at it again with fresh eyes, and I just got a lot more joy out of how radical the colours are and how they play together, because it's pretty busy. You've got the paisley patterning on the front, you've got the checkered pattern on the sleeves and the back, and then I've done another variation on the checkered pattern on my collar here, but it's still elegant. But yeah, so just looking at it, then I started to get a lot more joy from it. And this green, this lime green, really reminded me of the new life in a forest in springtime, just those buds that just come up everywhere, and how intensely bright and iridescent the green is.
Yep.
So this jacket's a rebirth, Dales. It's like us. It's symbolising rebirth and new life. So I'm really happy with it. Okay, so as you know, I've done some minor modifications to it. So I just want to go through one last time and just go through all of the changes that I've done on the jacket. So just to remind you, here's a picture of the original design. And the obvious change that I've made was just to make mine a crop jacket that sits in my waist. But I want you to look closely at the original, and if you look at the paisley motifs on the front of the jacket and then around the cuffs on the sleeves, you can see that they've been embroidered around the edges in pink yarn using a chain stitch. And you'll also see that sequins have been sewn in the middle of all the little dark green flowers that are inside the paisley motifs. There's also quite a lot of extra crochet that was done along the button bands. And Sidsel's designs are only ever knitted in 2 colours, but because she just loves to make her designs as colourful as possible, she adds all the colours in at the end through embroidery and crochet. I haven't done a lot of embroidery or crochet on my finished knitted garments before, so that's actually why I picked this design in the first place, just to get more experience to do that. But when I finished knitting the garment, I really loved the way it looked without any embroidery, because I mean, you have to admit that this lime green is a pretty radical colour. And then on top of that, like I said, you've got all of these busy patterns with the paisley and the checkered, and then I've got the collar on here as well. And you also have to admit that the bright pink and the cobalt blue is a radical contrast colour to put together with the green, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but I still love the way it looks. I think it looks really striking, but I really like the way, and I think it looks really groovy. And particularly because you've got the bright pink and the cobalt blue creating such strong lines, you can see that really on the back. I'll take it off a minute and show you. So here's the back of the jacket, and I think it just looks really crisp and groovy with this bright pink and cobalt blue lines down here. The eyes sort of drawn to these strong lines. And I didn't want the embroidery to take away from that, so that's why I haven't done it. I did try it out. I did the pink on the sleeves around these paisley motifs, but I was right. It took your eye away from these strong lines, so I took it back out again. But I didn't want to completely give up on the idea of embroidery, so I tried to embroider around the edges in the same dark green colour, because I thought, okay, I won't be adding any extra colour in. I'll just be giving it extra texture. But it's funny, it really did not look good. When it's done, when you do the chain stitch in the bright pink, it's obvious what you're doing and it looks neat and looks good. But when I did it in the dark green, it just looked like really messy knitting, as if I'd done a whole lot of mistakes. Yep. So that came out as well. And then I decided I wouldn't put sequins on it because in my mind, when you've got all the sequins in there, the chain stitch around the outside just kind of frames it in. So I've just left mine plain. But I think it's good. Yep. Now, the collar is my addition. The original doesn't have a collar, so I want to talk about that now. So here's a close-up picture of the collar, and I wanted the collar to look like it's been made out of a different, thicker fabric. So I took the checkered pattern on the sleeves and knitted it in garter stitch. And this is a really exciting thing to do because it's always surprising how different the pattern will turn out. If you look closely at the lime green on the collar, it's like there's two thin lines and then a column of thicker bumps followed again by two more thin lines. So it looks completely different from the sleeves, but all I did there was knit the same checkered pattern that's on the sleeves, but instead of doing it in stocking stitch, I did it in garter stitch. So it was really exciting to see how that turned out. And then I did a reverse double crochet stitch in dark green around the edge of the collar. That's also known as crab stitch, and it's just a great way to finish the edges. So it just gives it a really neat, crisp, kind of scalloped finish. So Sidsel does the front bands and the collar band all in one, but because I added a collar to mine, I had to do my front bands differently, but I started off in the same way that she does them. So the garment is knitted in the round, so there's a steek going up the front. So she starts off by knitting a steeked sandwich, and that's what you can see here in this light green. And she does this really well. She does this by the inside colour. She makes a contrasting colour. And so this one here it's bright pink. And I love the way it just sort of flows down and joins into the lining on that goes around the waistband. So you start off with a steak sandwich. And I've actually done that a few times, as you know. And I've also done a pretty in-depth tutorial on it. So patrons, you can go to the Patreon site to see that tutorial, but actually an easy way of finding it is go to
fruityknitting.com, and if you look on normal desktop browser towards the top left, there's a whole lot of links for patrons that says that, and there's one that says tutorial index, so that takes you to an
so
index.
click there and then you'll see steak sandwich and you click on that and then you'll get directly fast to that tutorial.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a fun thing to do, and when you do it, it just gives the most tailored kind of crisp edge, and I loved it so much I almost just stopped there because I just liked how sort of square it looked, but I did want the garment to be practical in winter and to be able to shut it up, so I reluctantly continued. And then I did, in the bright pink, I did 2 rows of double crochet and then a row of double crochet in the light purple, and then again I did the crab stitch or the reverse double crochet stitch on the edge. So my button bands don't overlap. I'm not using buttons, I'm using clasps here. I just like the way those stripes of colour sort of are balanced like that, so I didn't want them to overlap. And these clasps I've used before. I used them on my Morningstar bridal jacket and I really like the way they work, so I've used them here as well. Only thing is, because I was in a daze, I sewed this part of the clasp on back the front. So instead of the hook being out like that, it's in like this, which is a lot harder to use. So I'm going to have to, at some stage, undo them all and redo it. But so yeah, so that's the button bands and I really love them. You can see how it looks underneath there. So you get a flash of this and you see more colour. It's great. Okay, so there's just one more thing that I want to talk about or want to show you, and that's a typical feature that Sidsel does in a lot of her designs, and that's introduce extra colour through vertical stripes. So I've done a short tutorial for you on how I do that, and that's coming up right now. And then straight after that, we're going to go to Fenu again for dress-ups, which is super fun.
Which Andrea loves.
So this design is the Paisley Kofta by Sidsel Høivik, and Sidsel's designs only ever use 2 colours in a row, which makes stranded knitting much easier, but she likes to add lots of extra colours to the design by embroidering and crocheting onto the finished knitted fabric at the end. And a typical feature of her designs is to have vertical stripes in contrasting colours, and she's done that on this design here with this purple chain stitch that runs along the outside edge of the front panel. This is super easy to do, and I have to do it on the other side here to make it balanced, so I'm going to show you how it's done. So when you're knitting the fabric, you need to knit a column of purl stitches. You can see this column of knit stitches here in the dark green. Well, to the left, just in there, is a column of purl stitches, but purl stitches always want to recede inside the fabric, so that's why you can't see them so clearly. But when I pull them apart like this, you can see that the purl stitches give you a ladder with lots of little bumps, and these are very easy to do the chain stitch on with a crochet hook. So Sidsel recommends that you use a 2.75mm crochet hook with this design. I don't actually have that size, so my hook is 4mm, and I'm just going to try to work my stitches a little bit tighter. So what I want is my purple stitches that will sit next to these green stitches, I want them to be the same size as the green stitches. So I'll just use the green stitches as my guide. So with my purple yarn, I'm just going to do a slip knot, and you just leave a fairly long tail so it's very easy to darn in at the end. And then I get my crochet needle and I put it through from the front of the fabric through to the back where I want to start the crochet chain, and I put that slip knot onto my crochet hook and pull it tight, and then I pull it back through to the front of the work like that. Now what I'm going to do is just put my crochet hook back through the material just 1 stitch higher, so just over the top of one bump, and just so that you can see what goes on the back, I then wrap the yarn over the top of the crochet hook and pull that yarn through again, and now I've got 2 loops on my crochet hook, and I just pull that second loop through the first loop, and that creates what looks like a knit stitch, exactly the same as the green one that's next to it. So that's how simple it is. Just keep repeating that process, going up 1 stitch at a time. So again, I put my crochet needle over the top of that next bump through to the back. I wrap the yarn over the top of it, pull the yarn back through. It's a little bit tight. I've got 2 loops on my needle, on my crochet hook, and then I pull that second loop through the first. So I'm just repeating this process all the way up the column of purl stitches right until I get to the top. And now I've just done my last stitch. So you pull the last stitch through just to make it a very large, long loop. And then you cut your yarn from behind. And then I pull the tail through to the front. And now I'm going to use the tapestry needle and I'm going to put the tail back through to the back again. And finally just weave the tail end in along the purple stitches on the back of the fabric. So there we are. It's a super easy trick to get extra colour into your knitting. So I hope you have fun playing around with that new technique. Every year on the second weekend in July, a very special festival takes place here on the island of Fenu, and that's Fanø. Fanø is a traditional event where the locals, who are known as Fanø, dress up in traditional costumes, dance to traditional music, and eat lots of traditional food. And the Fanø Association has a large collection of costumes which are lent out during the celebration. And my two guests here, Kiss and Klaus, are responsible for looking after and repairing all of the costumes. They've got a lot of expertise in this area, and today they're going to show us and talk about the costumes. And as you can see, they've dressed me up in a costume, which I'm thrilled about. So Kiss and Klaus, thank you so much for inviting us here.
You're welcome.
So, Kiss, can you start and just tell us a little bit more about the activities that take place during Fanø?
Yes, we have the celebration of what we say in Danish, the Fanø Day. And these are going on from Friday to Sunday. And on the harbour front, we have a very big tent set up for music and dance. And some smaller tents for food, for coffee drinking, for sales of merchandise. And in the middle of, in Norby, in the village hall, there the women will gather to get their borrowed dresses on. And we also offer them help with the tying of the head and neck scarf. And that will take us about 4 hours. And then Saturday evening in the same village hall, we have our traditional dinner and a play, then followed with a big ball. And that will go on until the wee hours of the night.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It is.
Say something about the dancing and the music.
Yeah, we have a long music and dance tradition over here. We have 2 dances, only 2. Sønderhåning and the Fanø. And it's couple dances. And it's showing how the sailing ship is moving on the big ocean. We have about 200 different pieces of music to accompany those 2 dances. And that will go on the whole evening, as I told you. And it's very special. The music is played in 2/4 speed, but the dance is going on in 3/4 speed.
That's very interesting. And you said something about when you look from above that it's all in a circle and the couples are dancing in waves.
Yes, because the dance is going around in a big circle, and if you stand and look down, you can see the circle move like this, like a big wave. But also if you only see one couple dance, they are also doing like this.
That sounds very beautiful.
Really beautiful, and you get, I would say, high. Yeah. Because you do that the whole night, turning around. Yeah.
Well, the costumes are very much part of Fenu's living cultural heritage, and it really must be such a highlight to see a couple of hundred people and children all dressed up beautifully together.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the costumes now.
Fanø owns about 200 costumes, and we lent out the 130 of these, and they have to be fitted and adjusted to the Fanø days. So we have a lot to do. What you will see now is Claus. He is our tailor, and he is making a quite new jacket. We are still sewing new jackets. What he is doing now is the edge from the arm coming down. And here you will see the sleeve. It is like a bended arm, so you can use it whenever you are working. This is for a finer dress, but bended it has to be. This is a jacket for a lady, and it's a jacket for a lifetime. And the shape you can see on the back is there the whole life, but the piece of material to go onto the front is too big, and then you will make a pleat to fit her. And if you should get pregnant or fatter, you can take it out again. The material, quite new, is made of silk, but in the front and on the sleeves you will see those ribbons. They are very old, about 200 years old. So we still are making new jackets and use them a lot. So now you're going to see some different types of the Fanø woman's costume she was wearing during her life. First, for the daily work, you will find a cotton, Fanø woman dressed in cotton, Marian. And this is not just for daily work at home. This is for going out to the beach, for digging for worms, for fishing. And this is a very special costume. On the head you can see a mask. This is to protection for wind and sun and sand coming into your face. And here you will see her red skirt. This is for harvesting. It was really a day for everything was fine, the sun was shining, and everybody was harvesting. So fine colors, your skirt are red, and a white piece on the front. And lift your arm. Now when you are harvesting, you have to bend over, and not to get dirty. You have a ribbon tied around you, so you can lift up your skirt and apron, so it will not get dirty. In the hand, as you can see, we have the little ask, the little bag for lunch and for everything else. This dress is for a Sunday afternoon at home, little finer as the daily dress in cotton. This is also cotton, but made finer. There is amber on the front, and on the back you can see the skirt. Now it's green with a green ribbon. down below. So now it's more specific. I think we should take the little girl first. Come on. This is Ronja. She is wearing a little girl's dress made in cotton, and as you can see, she's not wearing the scarves. Until you start the school of age, you will start wearing the scarves, but until then you are wearing a hat. It's called a hateline. And turn around, please. Look, the little girl has a red skirt. The little girl are wearing a red skirt. Mange tak. And this is for the wedding festivities. This is the bridesmaid. She is wearing the very special headpiece. And if you turn around, we can see on the back side, and turn your head a little bit back over, bend, yes, like this. Now you can see the mirror. That means her boyfriend, she has to have a look at her boyfriend those days. And also on the back, there will be the small pearls to keep away spirits, bad spirits. And the bridesmaid, she is wearing her finest jacket with a white apron made in plissé. And she also wears a green skirt, her finest green skirt. Thank you. Beautiful. Bente, she is going to the wedding. She is wearing her finest dress made of silk. The apron is made of silk and very fine wool for the jacket. On the head, she is wearing silk scarves. Her husband, the sailor, he brought the materials home as materials as well as the scarves from far away. And turn around. And here you will see the green, fine green skirt with a green ribbon. And today we are wearing silver buttons. And on the lining, you will have the tipper she got from her wedding day. And what is a Fenu woman, what does he have under all this? On the first, you will see the green skirt. Then you will have the white skirt. And after that, the trouser. And sometimes you even have 2 to 3 more big skirt under. The men over here, they were sailors. They sailed the 7 seas. So they were more internationally dressed. As a captain, when ashore he should negotiating for cargo shipments, he would get dressed in his black suit, trouser, half-long jacket, white shirt and vest. So he could go ashore as a fine man. And what is Kiss wearing? This is really more sad. Because this dress I'm wearing, first of all, some of the parts are from my wedding day. This is my wedding jacket. Underneath, I have another jacket. This is to be used as a widow's jacket. On, as a skirt, I have my bride skirt. And this could also be used for widow skirt. And today I'm wearing a black apron. And as you can see, this jacket is a little more different as we use it up here in Nørby. This is a jacket from Sønderhå. That's why it's open in the front. And I'm not wearing a belt buckle. I'm wearing a long piece of material with tipper. On my head, I have the hat from my confirmation. When I put these things together, I can baptize, I can go to church, carrying a child for baptizing, and then I can also, when the Fanø woman passes, I'm going to be buried in it. So it is.
Welcome back. I have to say I have really fond memories of our time on Fenu, and particularly recording that segment. We were there for quite a long time during the day, a lot of different people, different parts, and both Kiss and Klaus are really lovely and both fascinating people.
Yeah.
You know, Kiss has travelled the 7 seas herself.
Yeah.
I think she worked on cargo ships. So,
And she's a harbour master too, isn't she?
Is she? Okay.
I think she
I'm
is.
not sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, fascinating people, really lovely. So we had a great time there. The Fenu Knitting Festival is on September every year. So if you ever get a chance to go there, do. It was a great experience for us, even though it was actually cancelled when we went. We still had a great time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'll see Kiss and Klaus and all of their friends out on the streets in their costumes.
Yeah.
They don't miss an occasion to get dressed up. So make sure you go and say hello, and I'm sure they'll be happy to meet you.
Yeah, and you can see I've got changed. I'm wearing my Morningstar bridal jacket, which is a design by Crystal Safer. And this was inspired by the traditional jackets that were worn in the southern part of Fanø, so around Sonderhus. So it's similar to the jacket that Kiss was wearing herself that had an opening here. So I love that idea of the opening, but I exaggerated my opening so it's a lot wider. And mine's ended up looking like a wine glass, doesn't it? A perfect wine glass. So I love this jacket. It's definitely one of my favourite, and as Kiss would say, it's my finest jacket.
That's right.
Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that segment. And I think Madeline's going to join us now.
So, I mean, I have to give up my spot.
You have to give up your spot temporarily. You can come back.
Thank you.
So Madeline's here. She's going to tell us about her project.
Hello.
What have you been knitting?
Well, I've been working on a design by Kim Hargraves called Inviting, and you can find it in her book Covet Capsule Collection Number 7. It uses Rowan's brushed fleece, which is a blend of wool and alpaca. Yeah. You can see it here. It's extremely soft and very, very light and fluffy, so it'll be a very comfortable jumper when I've finished with it. Yeah. And the design itself is very simple. So it's an easy knit, and I actually said this last episode, that was one of the reasons that I actually picked it in the first place, because, well, in the past I have done more complicated designs, but Mum's always been there. She's explained every single step of the way, and whenever I messed up, she would help me. But now she's a bit too busy because she's driving Dad around to different appointments, and of course you also have your own work to do. So we decided I should be a big girl and figure things out on my own.
It's a good way of learning.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you'll learn pretty fast. So hold up what you've done. That's the back, go right up to the shoulders. So it is very simple, and it's just going to sit in your waist.
Yeah.
And this is the front, a little bit past the underarms.
Yeah.
That's cool. So how have you been going with it? Because I haven't helped you at all.
Yeah. Well, apart from one time you gave me a little tip, because overall I went pretty well. But there was one part where I was supposed to increase the number of stitches, and I did that by making one stitch. I don't know how you
it's
say
called
it.
make one.
Yeah, you pick up the bar that runs between the stitches, and then you're supposed to knit through the back loop, but I knitted through the front loop, and I did that a few times. So when I looked at my knitting, I just had several fairly significant holes. So I had to unravel that. I didn't understand how that happened. Mum told me to knit through the back loop.
Yeah, it's because knitting through the back loop will twist the stitch and tighten it up so there won't be a hole there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But it is gorgeous wool. You're going to look like a bunny rabbit in it,
Yes,
an
I will.
Easter bunny.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been fun to knit, and because it's such a neutral colour, white, and it's such a simple design, it'll be a very versatile and useful addition to my very colourful closet.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I'm knitting it. But
everybody's
miss
probably
Farrell.
wondering what you're wearing right now. So this is the Lovage by Marie Wallen,
Yeah.
which looks stunning. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And
this
colourful.
is a Farrell design. And I do miss knitting Farrell because it's just a bit more challenging. It's a bit more difficult, and you get to work with all these different colours and have these lovely patterns come up.
Yeah. But it's fun, isn't it? So this is the garment you started before, the Bresser, and you stopped it. Why did you stop it again?
Because I messed up. I made a mistake and I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. I ended up I'd knitted up to here roughly. I was supposed to
On the
start
sleeves,
supposed to start the Farrell on both sleeves, but one of the sleeves had a higher stitch count than the other, and also it was longer than the other, and I couldn't understand how that happened. Mum was too busy, like I explained before, to help me. So we just said, okay, we'll put it aside. And once I've finished the inviting, I'm going to pick it up again.
But in the meantime, since I finished my paisley jacket, I thought I'd figure out what the problem was and get her going. So I've figured it out. They're both even now. It's amazing because the body and the sleeves, it's actually knitted. It looks machine knit because it's knitted on a 2.25 millimetre needle. So it's very, very fine. And it really does. It's so fine, isn't it?
It's beautiful.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then I just did the Farrell on both sleeves, and I've just done the row that joins it together. And that's a real nuisance because there's often things that are wrong, and I've done something wrong here too because the pattern hasn't sorted itself out right. So I need to know if I've got too many stitches in the wrong area, or I've done the first row of patterning wrong. But this is kind of tedious. So I thought I'll just set you up so it's all perfect, and then you can have fun doing the top half of the yoke.
I have to keep an eye on her because I'd actually thought I'd do this part myself. And Mum likes to take over projects sometimes, but she's promised I get to do the rest of the jumper.
Yes, I do take over people's knitting. Okay, but it's going to look gorgeous, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
It's going to be really great.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so actually in Australia, my younger sister, who is 14 years younger than me, Fiona, that family, she and her husband and her two little kids, they've started, because of the lockdown probably, they've started to binge watch Fruity Knitting.
Yeah.
Haven't they?
Yes, and the eldest, so the girls are my cousins, of course, and the eldest one is 7, Simba. She's actually been inspired to start knitting herself.
Yeah, she's really keen.
Yeah, so she wants her first project to be a poncho. And my Aunt Fiona, so Mum's sister, has also been looking at some Kim Hargraves designs, and we'll see whether she'll pick one of those as well. But we can't wait to see what they get started with.
So I've got two sisters. I've got an elder sister who's 2 years older and Fiona who's 14 years younger. So my elder sister and I, we grew up and we did a lot of knitting and crafts because my grandmother was still active. She was in her 70s then and she taught us a lot. And then when my younger sister came through, my grandmother was in her 90s, so she had less energy, and I think Fiona missed out on a lot of the crafting that we enjoyed. So she hasn't done a lot of knitting, but she's really inspired to now.
Yeah.
So she's actually going to start on a Kim Hargraves pattern, this pattern here, which is one that I plan to knit myself. So we might knit along in tandem. But anyway, we want to do a special shout out to Simba because it's so cool. She's 7 years old. She goes to a Steiner school.
Yeah, in German, Germans might know the Steiner school better as the Waldorfschule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they do a lot of crafting and gardening at the Steiner school. And Fiona, I think, is having a ball doing that with her two little girls. So this is a special shout out to Simba. We thought she'd love to see herself on the big screen on television. So here she is sitting on the couch with her mum, Fiona, knitting her very first project, and her knitting looks really neat. So well done, Simba. That's fantastic. We're so excited and we're going to really look out for your progress on your poncho.
Yeah, good on you.
She's even joined our Ravelry group.
Has she?
Yeah. So Simba, you have to post photos of your little poncho and we'll be rooting for you.
Yeah.
Actually, they've been sending us photos of their house in Byron Bay in Australia, and it's a typical open plan big Australian house with lots of light pouring in, and we've just been thinking how beautiful it looks and how we'd love to be there soaking up the sun.
Yeah.
Especially Dad, soaking up some vitamin D.
Yes.
Well, we should call Dad back again.
Yeah.
So I'm back. I just wanted to mention really quickly, we put on live events for our Shetland patrons, or particularly for our Shetland patrons. We've had a couple of really good ones just recently. One was with Marie Wallen, and then we had another a couple of weeks later with Clara Parks, both really well attended, which was great. These are open. It's a live session, question and answer session with the guests where our Shetlands can attend online. We also make an audio recording of those sessions, and Andrea edits that up, and we make that available as an audio podcast. And that audio podcast is available to our Shetland patrons, but also to our Merinos. I think we've got 43 episodes of the audio podcast out now. They're a really great resource because it is a question and answer session. It's different to what we do in the YouTube interview, kind of different nature of stuff. So there's often really good information in there. So if you are a Merino or a Shetland patron, make sure you check them out. If you go to fruityknitting.com, again, there are these links at the top left, quick links for patrons, it says, and there's one that says Audio Podcast Index. If you click on that, you'll see a list of all of the episodes by the name of the guests, so you can pick out whatever guests you're particularly interested in and have a listen. Really worthwhile.
And they are really good. There's a lot of extra information, technical information comes out in those audio podcasts. So it's a definite resource that you want to make a lot of use of. And we just want to remind our patrons that that's there, the Shetland and Merino patrons, because we are trying to put out content whenever it is at all possible, but we haven't been able to work the way we used to work because of Andrew's health condition. But we also want to say now that Marie Wallen, who is one of my all-time favourite designers, she's always been up there as one of my favourites, she reached out to us because she wanted to help us. And since our patrons provide us with a stable income, which we so appreciate right now, Marie is offering Fruity Knitting patrons a very generous 50% discount off all her Ravelry patterns for the month of December. So when this comes out, there's still a few more days in December for you to make use of that generous offer. And we are so grateful for Marie for doing this for us. Now, likewise, Carol Sunday also reached out to us to help us, and we featured Carol Sunday in our new releases segment back in episode 65. And Carol is a very experienced designer with a prolific output of very beautiful and elegant designs, and she also has her own yarn range, which is humanely sourced and expertly spun in Italy. They're very, very beautiful yarns. So Carol also wanted to support us during this difficult time, and for the complete month of January, Carol is offering a 30% discount of all her patterns in her Ravelry store and a 10% discount of all her yarn and kits from her web shop. So patrons will find the full details of both these discounts on our Patreon page. So thank you so much to both Carol and Marie.
I did want to say thank you once again for all of the different support that we've been receiving over the last month. Now, messages, comments on the YouTube channel or on Instagram, so many things. Also, things like designers contributing their profits for some period of time, obviously very generous and really very much appreciated. Again, we have to say we're not able to respond to all the messages or the contacts that we get. Please, we can only ask you to understand that. We've got a lot to juggle at the moment, so yeah. But we really do appreciate it. I think we managed to read everything that comes in.
Yes.
So yeah, we really very much appreciate that. And just to go over it very quickly once again, if you enjoy the show, and we hope you do, please support the production of the show by becoming a patron. That is our regular income. It's what we depend on. So you can do that by going to patreon.com/fruityknitting. And if you'd like to make a one-off donation towards our health expenses, then you can do that by going to paypal.me/fruityknitting. Both of those links will be in the description below the video, or you can find them at fruityknitting.com. Yeah, and we really appreciate all of the support. It's been very, very generous and really makes a huge difference.
Yes, thank you. So it's been a privilege for us to spend some time with you again. We hope you had depending on where this comes out, a wonderful Christmas and a really happy New Year. And coming up now is the interview with Vivian, which you'll love, and we hope to see you very soon.
Yep.
So bye.
Bye.
Welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm here again with the Danish knitwear designer, teacher and author Vivian Høxbro. In our last interview together, we covered Vivian's career in general and her extensive contribution to domino knitting. In today's interview, we're going to learn about the traditional Danish nightshirts. And Vivian's book, Traditional Danish Sweaters, was published in 2019 and it's available in both Danish and English. And I think it's a great book. Apart from covering the history of the Danish nightshirts, it has over 200 traditional stitch patterns. There's 10 different sweater designs, and what's really fun, there's instructions on how to design your own traditional Danish sweater. I'm really interested in this topic, so I'm thrilled that you're joining us again to share your research and your knowledge on the subject. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled too.
Good. Now, I would love you to start with a little bit of history on knitting in Denmark. Mm-hmm. So I have Danish ancestry, and when I first came to Denmark, one of my aunts told me that knitting was actually outlawed here in Denmark for a period during the 16th century. And I also read I read somewhere the story about Queen Sophie, who would row herself out to her own private island so that she could knit in secret. Now, I'm pretty sure it's a fanciful version of history, but you do have ancestors who knitted and worked in the profession, so perhaps you can also use their story to illustrate some Danish knitting history.
Yeah. Well, it's not true. Christian IV were desperate in need for money because he was in war and he wanted to build beautiful buildings that you can see today in Copenhagen. So what he did was he made some restrictions.
Okay.
And in 1639, and in order to reduce the import of luxury goods, and some of the luxury goods were the beautiful silk nightshirts that the rich people imported, and they were almost their most expensive garment at all, and it was knitted perfectly in silk and with gold and silver embroidery. Wow. This is Danish though, but it is in a Norwegian museum in Oslo. And the other story that you are referring to is Rose Tremaine and her book. And of course, she's an author. She can tell a story and she doesn't need to be true.
Yes.
But the Queen was expecting Christian IV. So, of course, he hadn't forbidden anything by then. So there's another thing in it that he wrote the restrictions in German, and it said that stricken is forbidden. And stricken is a German word, and it means the act of knitting and the actual knitted item.
Garments, yeah.
And it wasn't the act of knitting that was forbidden.
Okay.
It was importing the garments. So that's how
So he
the
was actually
misunderstanding
a
was.
good king, and he was restricting imports so that his own population could have an income.
Yeah.
And
He even established an orphanage for children, for boys, where they could learn how to knit for a living. So he didn't forbid knitting.
Yeah.
It's a lie.
Okay. And you've got ancestors who knitted and...
Yeah. Well, everybody knitted at that time, but not as their what do you call it, for living. But in a certain area of Jutland where there were only heather, and it was the soil was really bad, but the only thing they could have was sheep. So they started knitting, and in 1839, there was an author who was asked to travel around and see how it was. And he figured out that 40,000 people would have knitting as their full-time job. And it was children and women and men and elderly people, everybody. And 40,000 people is as many as in a medium large city of Denmark. So it was quite a lot. And not very far from there, my great-grandfather and great-grandmother lived in a tiny little house. And he was, I don't know what the name is in English, but he was selling woolen goods. He would walk a long way from the middle of Jutland all the way around the island of Fenu. And I don't know if you know it, but Denmark is a country of islands. So he walked a long, long way, and you know how long way it is, to sell his goods. And of course, it was a hard life, a terrible life for him, and he died quite young. He did, and my cousin and I, we did this, wrote this book about him and his terrible life, based on his letters to his wife. 15 years of letters to his wife, which was really interesting. I wouldn't be able to read them though, but my cousin could. We have these books for our grandchildren so that they can see and remember that our ancestors worked very hard for us.
I think it's a good idea to be reminded of that. That's true. Okay, now the method of knitting actually in Denmark changed over time. So I think there was 3 different ways that knitters would hold the yarn and the needles. So can you just quickly show those 3 different ways?
Yeah.
I'm sure knitters will recommend them. And then say what the advantages of each of them are and why you think it has actually changed over time.
I'll tell you about Eilert Sund. He's a vicar, and he was traveling all over Norway to study craft in Norway in the middle of 1800. And he went to vicarage, and he saw that the vicar's wife, she would knit what I would say the English way. I don't know. I'm not very good at it though, but throwing like this, constantly keeping going. And his the peasants, the what do we call them, those who helped in the kitchen, they were peasants. They would knit into the stitch, 1 throw, knit 1 stitch, and then
drop
slip.
it.
Yeah. And the vicar's daughters, they would knit what we call the continental way.
With the yarn in the left hand.
Yes. And he realized that the continental way was the fastest way. And as he went all over Norway, he told people, do it in this way because it's faster. In that case, you can earn more money.
Yeah.
But in Denmark, when our nightshirts were knitted, they were knitted the old way.
Yeah.
Or maybe the English way, I don't know, but not the continental.
Yeah. So many knitters won't have heard about the traditional Danish nightshirts. So can you describe what they looked like and say who wore them and in what historical period they were worn?
Yeah, they were worn after. Well, you saw the silk nightshirt from 1600, and then what happened is, of course, that the young women, the peasant women, they saw the beautiful silk shirts and they wanted to make their own. And of course, they couldn't use silk, so they used the wool from their own sheep. And they knitted these beautiful sweaters, and they were short. At least after 1810, they became short. So if we find a longer one, we know it was from 1700. And they are very tight, very small. Today, if we look at them, they look like children's sweaters.
Yeah.
But they were smaller at that time. The peasant they were smaller. They didn't get same food as we do today. Yeah. They were knitted very tightly. You saw the peasant way of knitting. And they knitted them in white. And then afterwards they were dyed. And right in this city, this little town, there were 4 dye houses in the middle of 1800.
Okay.
But if they wanted it red, which was the most beautiful color, they had to dye them in Copenhagen.
Okay. So what other colors would they have dyed them in? Local plant?
Green.
Okay, yeah.
Red, some of them blue, some of them black. Mostly the elderly people had black. And they were all knitted in beautiful patterns. Some of them not so many patterns, but most of them really many sophisticated patterns. And I find it really strange that they knitted all those patterns and then they dyed them. And then this is the only thing you can see of a Falster woman from this island. Falster is my island. And on this island, this is the Falster woman. And this is the only thing you can see of the nightshirt.
So she wears it underneath a vest, and you only
everything.
see the top of the sleeve.
Yeah, she would only have a little linen thing underneath.
Okay. So, now it's called a nightshirt. It translates to nightshirt from Danish. The original Danish word is, how do you say it?
Nattøj.
Yeah, nattøj.
With meanings nightshirt.
Yeah. So, but they weren't just worn at night because there wasn't a big differentiation between. They didn't have pajamas, in other words.
No, there weren't any nightshirts.
Yeah.
They wore it all day long and all night long. And of course the houses were cold. It wasn't, even in summer, it was cold in the houses. So they would wear them all day long. And
And it was only a garment for women?
Only for women, yes.
Yeah. So that's different from other traditions.
Yeah.
The fact that it's only for women.
At the end of 1800, it stopped, and then the fashion was ready-wear clothes, and for those of them who could afford it, they would buy ready-wear clothes, and the period of the nightshirt were over.
And in recent times, the Danish nightshirt isn't well known. So how did you first discover it, and what led you to write a book on it?
Well, I have always been interested in knitting history. And of course, when my cousin and I wrote the book, my interests were I was more interested. And I saw these poor little books, well, beautiful books, and it had all it needed in it. But these are the books we had about the Danish nightshirt. And when I saw the books about fairies, Norwegian, Shetland, all those beautiful traditional knitting books, I thought we needed a book. I wanted a book for the Danes to be proud of. That was my goal.
Yeah.
Can I show the Danish book?
Yes.
Okay. So here's the Danish book. That's my granddaughter on the front. But I just wanted a really beautiful book.
Yeah, to bring it to wider attention. Now, what was your process? You told me that you went to a museum that had these nightshirts and you studied them. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Actually, on these islands, we have the largest collection of nightshirts in Denmark. I think there'll be like 130 in the whole country of Denmark. But here we have 60 of them. I don't know why, but that's the fact. So when we moved to here, to this island, I asked the museum if it was possible for me to study them. And they said yes, and I sat at the museum every Thursday for more than a year and studied one nightshirt at a time. So I looked at it, I measured it, I draw it. I draw every little, because it's hard to see because they were so felted.
Yeah.
So I draw them and I charted all the patterns. I wanted all the patterns to be in the book. They're all there. And I want the Danes to be proud of their ancestors and what they could do. And especially, I need to tell you, especially on these islands, they knit the traveling stitch, lots of really, really difficult patterns. And when I teach it today, I realize that it's really, really hard to do.
And this is an example of them.
Yeah.
So the travelling, it's like a one-stitch cable.
Yeah.
So let's talk now about how the nightshirts were constructed and the different or the special techniques, knitting techniques that were used.
Yes. Well, I've chosen 2 local garments, and I'll show you this first. This is from Ostrup, very nearby here. So it's from my island. And they would begin by casting on the German twisted cast on, and then they would knit 1 row of twine knitting in order to get it strong.
Yeah, okay, so twine knitting for non-Scandinavians, because Scandinavians know twine knitting quite well, is just when you're twisting, you work with 2 strands and you twist the yarn threads in between each stitch.
Yes, exactly. And they would knit this ribbing, and the front and the back are knitted flat. And then when the ribbing is done, they would knit in the round. So they had to join them, and some of them are unraveled here. But this lady, this woman, she figured that if she would knit the few stitches together here, it would be stronger. And then they would knit in stockinette stitch in the rounds with 6/8 double-pointed needles, and when they are almost at the
underarm,
right before the armhole, they start patterning, and that's where the complicated look at this traveling stitch patterns begin. And I don't know if you know it, but it's really hard when you knit traveling stitches on the wrong side where you can't see anything. But they could do it.
So this was knitted flat then?
Exactly.
The underarm up.
Yeah. And there's another special issue for this island. When they are at the neckline, they bind off, and the oldest of them has the seam here, the shoulder seam here. But this woman has figured that she wanted to make the nice shape here, and then she stopped here. And now we are going to the sleeve. And they'll start again with a German twisted, and then twine knitting. And here's a special sleeve pattern, edge pattern or hem pattern. And then the sleeve here is very short. Some of them are longer, but most of them are short. And they have this cross and star pattern at the sleeve. And of course they increased, but they would increase integrated in the pattern. So not like we do with sort of a seam, but they would integrate it in the pattern and again knit it in the rounds. And then...
So the pattern motifs, like a star pattern, would just gradually get bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can see the long sleeves, this will very easily get bigger. What you do is you have 1 star on 1 needle, cross on 1, star on 1, and a cross on 1. And when you finish 1 star, you increase 2 stitches on every needle. Here we have a little sort of triangle, so you just continue with a triangle as a gusset.
Yeah.
And of course, when I design, I know exactly how wide this is going to be because I can calculate it on the computer. But they couldn't do that. So they would just sew in the sleeve, and then they'd continue until it fitted.
Okay.
At least I think that's the reason why.
So they don't know how wide it's going to be here on the sleeve.
No.
So they stop here, they sew it in, and then they continue knitting the back piece up and around to fit it.
Yeah.
So that's why the sleeve seam is not on the top of the shoulders, but towards the front.
And the sleeve seam is that you turn inside out, and then what do you call it? The 3-needle bind-off.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which only a few are not knitted together, which I also find quite bright.
Yeah. So that's beautiful.
It is.
Okay, now this garment is a replica of
It
an
is.
original
Exactly.
historical
Yes.
garment, isn't it?
But
From
of course,
this island.
the yarn is thicker,
Yeah.
and that's the reason why it's bigger, because it is a very tiny little one.
The original.
Originally, yeah.
Okay. Now this one has got some ribbon around the neck.
Yeah.
This one is also a replica, isn't it?
It is. Almost. Almost. Yeah, again, it started with the twisted German and the twined knitting.
Yeah.
And then the hem is different. On this island, they had all sorts of different hems. And then there would always be a vertical
Border.
Yeah. And it started with a twisted, twined knitting,
Yeah.
and it ended up with twined knitting. And then all over, you have the what do you call it?
The star.
Star cross. I call it cross and star pattern.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is a very typical cross and star pattern. But of course, they did all sorts of cross and star patterns.
Yeah.
And another thing about this is that I love the little gosset here. This is a little gosset, and you see, this is the waist. And that's the reason why I can see that this was from before 1810. So maybe it's a copy of a 1700 sweater. And then
That's because it goes lower than the waist.
lower than the waist, yeah. Otherwise
Okay.
it would have begun here.
It would just end at the belly button, so
Yeah.
to speak. Okay.
And then you see it started with what you call a mustache.
Yes.
And then it turned
Into another pattern.
changed to be another pattern, and
Yeah.
I really find it beautiful.
So this is just the way to do the shaping
To
on
make
this
it
side.
wider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is very beautiful.
Yeah. And the sleeve, well, I need to tell about this silk ribbon. Many of them has silk ribbons. And of course they were very expensive, so not all of them have the silk ribbon. And they would typically be something that you'd get as a gift from your fiancé. So, and I know when I bought it, it was quite expensive. So it
This is early lingerie.
And the sleeves, this is not a copy because I hadn't figured out how to increase it at
Inside
that
the
time.
pattern.
No.
Okay.
So I did it differently. And here, again, you have the beginning is on all the others, and then you have a little zigzag border, like the half of it, and a little pattern, all like smaller than this. It's very, very nicely done.
Very
the design
beautiful.
is beautiful.
Now I can see on this one, and you have done some replicas of a few different designs. Again, you've got some form of checkered pattern
Yeah.
along the border. Was that typical to put the checkered?
This is from Zealand.
Okay.
This is from Zealand, from Køge, just south of Copenhagen.
Yeah.
This one is from my island here, and it was so strange. I had never seen anything like it. Look at the pattern here with the little stairs.
Oh, look at that. That's beautiful.
And
isn't that beautiful?
It is. And look at the stars, they are longer. This designer, I call her designer,
Yeah.
must have been really, really bright. And see, the cross and star pattern is completely different from all the others. And even under the sleeve, she has a little pattern here, and then this little border that goes all the way up and sort of, I don't know how to say it, but it finished the design for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was sewn so that you couldn't see it.
Okay, so grafted
Yeah, it looked exactly like it was knitted all the way.
all the way up.
Yeah.
And did she also do this?
No.
You did that.
There are no edgings at the neckline on
Okay.
the old sweaters.
Okay.
So I did that in order to get it useful. And on this one, I did a little crab stitch. What do you call it?
Moss stitch. Oh,
No,
oh,
it's
the
a
border.
crochet.
Yeah, crochet border.
I think it's crab stitch. Whatever. But I did it. I finished it.
Now, what looks to be typical on all of the designs is this split hem.
Exactly.
Is that the
You see
case?
that all over the country. But this had a very beautiful way of putting it together, I think. Only 2 stitches are knitted together.
Well, it's been just so great to see the different examples of them and to see how they're made. And they are really different from other Scandinavian sweaters. They really are quite unique in their own, aren't they?
Yeah, for me it's been like in heaven to study all the sweaters through Denmark. And I remember the first time I opened the box and there was all the beautiful sweaters. It's just like a message from the history, and I almost cried.
Yeah.
And so it has been a blessing for me to work with the sweaters.
Yeah. Okay, now we've got to talk about star motifs, because star motifs were the most popular motive or pattern to be used on nightshirts. And you did write in your book that out of the 87 historical garments that you examined, 54 of them had star patterns. Yeah. So what did stars represent for Danes during that historical period? And can you show us some different star patterns and explain how they've been knitted?
Yeah. We all know about the star that led the three wise men to Mary and Jesus. And of course, that is a religious meaning. But the peasants in Denmark, in the wintertime, it was really, really dark. And if you look up at the sky, you see these bright stars on the sky. And they thought they were holes in heaven, right up to paradise. So, of course, it's a protecting symbol. And I saw it on almost every sweater. Sometimes on the sleeves and sometimes on the front, but mostly on the sleeves. And most of them have stars. And of course, to write a book like that, I have had to make tons of sample swatches. Many of them are here. This is a decoration I made for an exhibition. And some of them are here. And if you look at this little star, that is what I'll call the basic star. And that's what you see most. There are 8 legs in the star, and it's separated with a twined, twisted stitch. And here, it looks, when you just look at it, it looks the same, but it is a little different. So this woman has just made it a little bit of difference in it.
Yeah, she's put in extra sort of lines here,
They go
hasn't she?
this way instead of this way.
Yeah.
So, and actually there are only one of them on that sweater. I don't know why. And then this one is also a simple one with 8 legs and must-stitch in the middle. And if you look at it, if you draw this, chart it, it'll be completely square. But when you knit it, it becomes flat because of the gauge. And this one is it's a sweater from a tiny little island called Fenu. And she made it longer so that when it's knitted, it's sort of squared. And how did she figure that out? I just don't get it. And here's another one where you have the traveling stitch pattern. It's very nicely designed. And look at this, how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
And this one, again, and there are twisted stitches. And this one, well, this is just this is just absolutely fantastic.
It is very fantastic.
It just looked like a pineapple or something like that.
Exactly. You've got she's really sort of spread them out. So you've got the 4 legs here and 4 legs there, and then.
And that was on sleeves, and it was so felted because they are used so much that I couldn't see really, but I could photograph it and push it up on the computer and see, wow, what is that? So it's really special.
So in your book, you have a section giving knitters advice on how to design their own traditional Danish sweater, which sounds like a lot of fun. And you've got, as I said, over 200 different patterns, including the border patterns and all of the star charts there that people can combine and put together. So can you give us an overview of the process of doing that, and then share one or two more detailed tips for knitters to get a really successful result?
Of course. everybody can design. It's not only for designers. And just look at the old sweaters and see that everybody could design.
Everyone had to design.
Yeah, hundreds of years ago. Of course, you can design too. My recommendation would be find a sweater that really fits you and that you like to wear. Put it on the table and measure it. And then draw a schematic and put your measurements on the schematic so that you have the basic ready. And then get some yarn and choose the yarn you want to use. And if you want to make knit and purl patterns, make sure you have yarns that shows it really nicely. Like this, you can easily see the patterns here. And then you need to figure out your gauge. If your basic pattern will be stocking stitch, then that would be your basic gauge. And then make sample swatches, choose in the book some of the patterns you want to play with, and knit sample swatches with it.
And you've got whole sections of border patterns and stars.
Exactly. It's organized like star patterns or vertical patterns or horizontal and border patterns and all that. And I'll recommend that you look closely into them. Many of the patterns are, let's see, some of them, I'll show you later. Some of the border patterns are when you look at them, they're nice on the right side. If you turn them on, you'll see they're even more beautiful on the wrong side. So make sure you just use all the fantasy you have and play with it. I want everybody to make their own sweater and use the star patterns in a modern way. So I gave my knitting group the instructions of how to do your own sweater, and I gave them all the patterns, and I asked them if they would like to make their own star sweater. And some of them did. This is the one Annie made, and it's very nice. I like that a lot. She has so many design elements, nice border. The bottom hem here is with two little
twisted
cable pattern. And then she made the horizontal border, the zigzag, and then she connected the borders here, and then continued upwards. And it's really, really nicely done.
It's very fine and beautiful. And she's continued this twisted cable all the way up here as the border.
Then she made it all in vertical patterns and different stars. She wanted to make different stars instead of just the same star. And for instance, this star is a funny star because two of the legs are just turned upside down, so it looks a little sad.
It does.
Yeah.
And on the back, has she got this?
Even one more star.
Yeah.
A little one.
Yeah.
And then the sleeves are sort of very nice, not very, very simple, but very nice.
Yeah.
And instead of the 3-needle bind off on the wrong side, she did it on the right side. And that's really nice. So that's Annie's sweater.
That's a very, very successful, beautiful, elegant design.
It is, yeah.
She's done that really well.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a jacket. It's actually a replica, except for the opening, because the replica was not opened, but it was not born with an opening. It was cut through. But this is born with an opening. You can steal from the patterns in the book. There are 10 sweaters, 9 sweaters and 1 shawl in the book. And some of them are replicas and some are new designs. But you can steal the ideas. And
that's a good way for someone who's less confident to start, to take a pattern that they like and then just swap out 1 or 2 motifs.
For instance, I saw this one when I gave my last talk, And she didn't want to have the star pattern on the sleeves, so she just made it very simple and with stockinette stitch on the sleeves. And it was really, really nice. So you can make your own decisions.
Now this one is really fanciful and looks very modern. It's a modern take on the traditional sweater, and this is your design.
It's almost like a crazy quilt in knitting, but it's my design. And I played with the patterns, and just look at this. This was the right side of the original pattern, and then when I turned it around, it's different, and I like that better. And here, this is just a little bit 3 rows of a reversed garter.
I'll put it up a little bit there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I have these little vertical patterns, and the vertical
Twisted
it
stitch.
looks like a spider, but it's sort of it's a traveling stitch pattern, a little complicated though. And I liked this little pattern here on the side, goes all the way through the sleeves and make it very movable to wear. And the middle here, the center part of the front and the back and the sleeves are the same cross and star pattern. And afterwards I've embroidered, and what do you call the stitches?
Duplicate stitch.
Duplicate stitches.
Yeah.
Just not everybody, just some of them.
Just random, bit of colour.
And I made the edge double because, well, the edge, I always like it double because it's stronger, and it's the same pattern as under the sleeve, so I like it a lot.
That's very beautiful. Yeah. I think this is a great design.
And it's my color. I love that color.
Yeah.
It's Harrisville yarn.
Okay, so that's putting in a little bit of colour. Now here you're using more colour, which I really like.
That's one of my knitting pals is Kirsten, who made this. And she wanted it to, she looked at the red sweater and made sort of the same border pattern that's different. Look at the back.
Yeah.
And then the horizontal pattern and the cross and star pattern. And again, as I do, the knitters like the little side pattern that goes all the way up. And she changed colors just a little bit to make a little difference from the original.
Which I think looks great.
And made the neckline double again. And
with a different colour on the inside.
It's supposed to be wide and easy to wear. And then this one is, well, I just wanted to show that you can also make it in colors, just like the Shetland sweaters or the Norwegian sweaters. So this is stars. I changed a lot of colors here on the base, the yellowish.
The background.
Yeah. Just like the Shetland sweaters, and then the stars. And here you see the edge. It's a long edge. It's a wide sweater. It's a sort of, what do you call them, one size fits all.
Oversized.
Yeah. And then here you have the pattern of the edge, and this is the back of it, which is really nice. And the color is very large, and so you bend it over. Here you see one pattern, and now the other pattern. So I like that.
I like the way you've just got one stripe.
Yeah. That's me.
With different colours.
That's
and
me.
that lovely orangey red. That's really great. Now there's just one more I want to show quickly, and this is actually on the cover of the English book. And here you've even incorporated beading inside the stars.
Many of the stars have moss stitch in them. And moss stitch, it's very easy to sew beads, to sew beads in moss stitch. Moss stitch has little holes in them.
Yeah.
But only a few, and very subtle, just a little bit to make the stars show more.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for showing us this and talking about your research with our audience. This is really fascinating and really special. And I think it's fantastic that you've done this collection, put all that hard work into collecting all the motifs, because it really is through knitters nowadays using it, that it'll continue on. That's how it keeps, the knowledge of it keeps getting continued on. So I'm very excited to make my own Danish star sweater. I might make one for Andrew as well. So we really appreciate you being on the show and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Good. Let's say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.